Welcome to The Compost Pile, a podcast where we break down gardening, homesteading, and more. Join your hosts, David Poole and Aaron Barnhill, as they pile up information and break it down so that you can be more successful in the garden. Hey, welcome back to The Compost Pile, your source for all things gardening, homesteading, and more. Today's a solo episode, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about seed starting. It's early January. We're reaching the point where we need to get our tomatoes and peppers seeded if we're going to grow them from seed instead of transplants. We need to be targeting starting these seeds about 6 to 8 weeks before our last frost date. Last frost date here in Southeast Texas is kind of tricky to pinpoint, so you also need to consider, if you're going to start them by seed, ways that you can up-pot them if they outgrow your seed starting containers. You always want to be prepared ahead of time so that you have healthy, unstressed plants that are ready to go in the garden at the right time. So let's talk a little bit about container selection. Really, you could grow these seeds in anything from peat pellets, peat pots, seed trays. You could grow them in old containers that you already have. It really doesn't matter, but you do need to ensure that these containers have an ample amount of drainage in them, because if we stay too damp in the container, number one, our seed can rot. If our seed manages to sprout, we could also get root rot in our seedlings, making them not ready. We've got all this stuff going. We got our seeds started, and we end up having root rot at the very end, and we've kind of wasted our time. And with tomatoes and peppers, we might not be able to have time to restart them depending on when that happens. So once you've selected your container, you need to think about what kind of mix you're going to put them in. So you could use a potting mix and put that into your containers, but oftentimes potting mix has larger particles, maybe some types of bark in them. You want to make sure that you sift these items out through some sort of screen. What you're looking for is the very light, fine particles left in that soil mix. We ideally will recommend using a germinating or a seed starting mix. These mixes are often sterile, and they're going to be made up of something like peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. You could also start them in just straight cocoa coir. We've had a lot of good success in doing that over the years because it's airy, it's light. When you pick it up, it's not heavy. It will hold moisture, but also has plenty of room for excess moisture to drain out. And the most important thing for seedlings is that we're getting oxygen into the root system once it begins to sprout. This is going to promote healthy roots. So if we're going to plant these seeds, we get our containers, we have our mix, we're going to get our tray filled up. We need to make sure that we have labels ready. Labeling is one of the most common things to see, and especially even for myself, that I forget and I don't do it before I start putting my seeds in, and then I get mixed up, and then I'm not sure what I'm growing or when the variety is ready. So I like to label them clearly with the variety, the type, and the date that I planted them in my seed tray, so that I can kind of know if I'm having some bad germination. I have a good idea of when they should have been germinated by. Most of your tomatoes and peppers are going to germinate between the 10 to 21 day mark, depending on what it is. Probably tomatoes a little faster, peppers a little bit slower. So we've got our labels in. We ideally only want to put one seed per cell into our seed trays if we're using a seed tray. While you can often buy plants and you'll see multiple seedlings in there, you'll have to separate those when they get larger. By having those two plants in the same cell, they're going to compete against each other for nutrients, resources, and they oftentimes can struggle, and you're going to get a poor seedling. Or if you just planted that out together in the garden, they're going to grow, and you're going to get two plants that are going to produce on a mediocre level instead of one excelling and doing really well. So when we get those seeds in our tray, we want to place them. I usually like to lay them on top of the cell, and then I will lightly press them down. You can do them with your finger. They only need to be just underneath the soil surface at maximum an eighth inch. Some people say maybe a quarter inch deep, but oftentimes just getting them underneath the soil surface and just press down gently does very well. We want to make sure that we have good seed to soil contact, and that's where you can kind of just lightly tamp them down with your fingers. So next thing we need to talk about is moisture and heat. Most of these seeds are going to need 75 to 80, 85 degree temperatures very consistently to germinate. So you need to pick a place inside or somewhere where you can control these variables. If you are going to grow them inside, be mindful of overhead vents and things that can cause your seedlings to dry out quicker or keep the soil cool. You'd be surprised what an air vent can change in an environment. We like to grow ours on a shelf. We do put a heat mat underneath it, and we'll keep that heat mat on until most of the seedlings in the tray have germinated, and at that point we're going to remove them. We want to remove that heat mat because we don't want the soil to dry out too quickly, and we want to kind of keep those seedlings from being stressed before we get ready to do the next phase or wherever we're going to go with them once they've germinated. Watering is oftentimes the most asked question about starting seeds. How much? How do I know when? We like to start our seeds out using just a common spray bottle, and we mist the tops to get the soil nice and damp. And you can honestly, if you're using a good quality seed mix, you can see the color variation from when it's damp to when it's dry. And you can kind of use this to know whether you need to add some more moisture in there. One of the ways that we like to regulate moisture is by using a humidity dome. We'll put that dome on there, and then you'll start to see the condensation rise to the top of the dome, and it kind of keeps the moisture consistent. When we start getting a bunch of germination or the majority of the tray is germinated, we'll remove that dome. But honestly, the best way to water your seedlings is to put them on a tray in which you can water from the bottom. You'd be surprised how much moisture will move through the soil and into the tray from watering in the bottom. So we started a tray of seeds on Saturday. It's now Monday, and we've poured probably 2 or 3 quarts worth of water into that tray, and it's soaked up very quickly. And we can see the soil color hasn't changed. It hasn't dried out. So we're going to continue utilizing the bottom water method to regulate and make sure that we don't overwater our seedlings. If we overwater the seedlings, then we can have some issues with damping off, where it almost looks like the seedling is pinched at the base, and that's a soil-borne pathogen, and that's really, really common if the soil stays too damp and doesn't have enough airflow. So depending on where you're putting your seedlings, make sure that you've got good airflow and that the seedlings can breathe. If you start seeing any kind of algae growth or fungal growth on top of the soil, or maybe even on your humidity dome, you need to provide some airflow into the area that you're doing, or maybe even remove the humidity dome to let it dry out some before your next watering. The last element that we need to think about when it comes to growing seeds is light. So we're growing them most of the time in a controlled environment, maybe indoors, because it's still pretty cold outside. We're 30, 40 degrees over the next couple days right now at the time of this recording. So outside is not the best place to put my seedlings because I have no way to regulate that temperature. Now, some of you might have some form of a small greenhouse that has poly panels that provides lots of light, and that's perfect as long as you can regulate the temperature. If you're growing indoors, I highly recommend a grow light. You want to make sure that grow light is overhead, not off to one side, because you don't want to promote your seedlings to kind of grow and lean towards the light. That causes them to be leggy, and that can make the seedling kind of stressed, and it doesn't transplant out very well sometimes when you move them into the garden. You want to keep that light maybe 2, 3, 4 inches above the actual seed tray. You want to keep it close. If you have it too far above, then it can also lead for your plants to stretch. And you'll notice as leaves begin to form, they're farther apart than they might normally be if the light is closer. So we oftentimes will move our light up as the seedlings germinate and grow so that it's at the appropriate height at all times. Light is one of those things that sometimes people think you can put it inside and you can put it in a windowsill. A south-facing window oftentimes does very well, but if you choose the wrong location, or we have a lot of cloudy weather back to back like we have here recently, your seedlings might not get enough light. They often need anywhere from 10 to 14 hours per day. So that's why we find using a grow light to be very successful. Grow lights come in all different shapes and sizes. You can get them that fit in standard light fixtures. You can get strip lights. They're super easy to use. So find what works best for you and your setup and position that overhead so that you'll have the best results. So we've kind of covered most of the basics of what you need to get your seeds started. There could be a lot more things that we could go into and get really, really technical about today. But my goal here is just to kind of give you, the 3 or 4 main components that we want to look at, and really to drive home that timing is everything if you're planting tomato and pepper seeds. We need 6 to 8 weeks prior to the last frost. So always keep that in mind. And let us know what you're growing in the comments below, what you're seeding out, and what your aspirations for your garden are this season. And we'll see you the next time on the compost pile. Thanks for watching.